Smart versus not now Saban, but the Saban program, the Saban team in Tuscaloosa. But Georgia playing much better football, especially on the defensive side, where to compare the athletes, you would think, well, the defensive personnel is comparable. But, man, Alabama was just ravaged by Ole Miss last week, where for Georgia, let's focus on the defensive effort that, I looked at today, Palmer, and it's just incredible to look at the numbers against Arkansas, Auburn, and Tennessee, three capable offenses in which they're limiting, 2.8 yards per carry, 1.8 yards per carry, -1 yard against Tennessee, barely 50% passing, just around 200 yards total offense in these games. And then these teams are turning around and putting up decent numbers against other teams and giving up next to no points in these games. So the Georgia defense, beyond the numbers, is just flying to the football and showing all that future NFL talent.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with someone before I joined you, and he was asking me what was my biggest surprise of Georgia so far. And I guess what has been surprising about them is just how good they have been. I mean, they're giving up 38.33 yards per game on the ground. You just mentioned those, averages that they've held very good offenses to. I mean, Auburn is an offense that is built on the run game, and in the past they have been, at least. And so Georgia shut them down. Tennessee came in as one of the, best offensive football teams in the country in terms of running the ball with that big offensive line, and Georgia held them to -1 yards on the ground. So I guess to me, that has been the biggest surprise of Georgia so far. And just the fact that they have been this dominant on defense. I certainly think that that'll be challenged this week with the rushing attack that Alabama brings with Najee Harris. We talked to Kirby Smart earlier this week. He said, on Monday, he said he thinks that Harris is one of the best, if not the best, running backs in the country. And I the film doesn't lie. I definitely think he's up there as one of the best running backs in the entire country. Yesterday we spoke with him, and he said that Harris, causes an issue for Georgia. Just the way that he is so dynamic in the running game and also capable of being used in the passing game. But as Smart pointed out, it's not all Harris. That offensive line is huge. They're averaging, 330 across the board with, some massive guys at the tackle positions. Jordan Davis is going to be a huge factor in this game for Georgia. Big number 99 in the middle, comes in at 330 pounds, 6'6", 330. If as Smart said, if he could have 3 Jordan Davises lining up on the defensive line this week, he'd feel a lot more confident. And so I think Georgia's ability to plug the middle there with Jordan Davis and be able to keep contained on the outside with the talented outside linebacker room, I think that's going to be one of the key deciding factors in this game.
So Stetson Bennett obviously is the guy that everyone's talking about. He has the target on him in regards to media focus and attention because he's the one guy who's done exceptionally well. But this is the first huge test on a huge stage, which every week in the SEC is a big stage. This one would be enormous, but he has stepped up to every challenge against 3 quality opponents to a certain extent. He's a guy that was a complete afterthought 4 weeks ago, but now he's at the forefront of this enormous game. And to my thought, in watching just about the entire Tennessee game, most of the Arkansas game, and let's see, the Auburn game, watched just about all of that this guy is he's been just playing within himself, doing what the offense requires. He throws the ball on time. He anticipates throws. He's cool under pressure, delivers the ball, mistake-free. The guy's doing the job.
Yeah, I mean, going back to my biggest surprises, if you had told me Stetson Bennett would be Georgia's starting quarterback against Alabama, I would have said that you were crazy. And just looking at the way he's done it, he has been steady Eddie back there. Just his consistency and capability to, make plays with his feet. Georgia hasn't had that in the past with Jake Fromm back there. You kind of, knew where Jake Fromm was going to be, and he was going to be in the pocket. He, showed that he could make a 10-yard scramble for the first down and slide, show off his baseball skills at the first down line, slide for the first down. But, Stetson if you look at the way that he runs the ball, he's physical. I mean, you look at his touchdown run against Tennessee, his 2-point conversion against Arkansas. He is putting his shoulder down and really challenging defenders. Had a late run in that Tennessee game with the game decided already, and he's scrambling for a first down on third down, and Kirby Smart has even said Stetson's got to get down more often, and I think so. But you don't want to take away that mentality of a quarterback that is fully confident in himself, running the ball and being physical with it. And I think that confidence is just what has stood out to me so much about Stetson Bennett. He's confident throwing the ball over the middle. I think that's why Kearis Jackson has been such a big factor in this Georgia offense so far this season. He's got 300 yards through 3 games. If you had asked me what Georgia receiver was going to have put up those kind of numbers this early, I would have said George Pickens. And Pickens is putting up. He had a touchdown against Arkansas, had a touchdown against Auburn as well. He's drawing double coverage, and I think a lot of that attention being drawn to the outside for George is opening up a lot of the opportunities in the middle for Kearis Jackson. And so, but going back to Stetson Bennett, I think just his confidence and his demeanor in the pocket, calm and collected under pressure, and his ability to make plays, he certainly has impressed me so far this season. And I'm excited to see what he can do against an Alabama defense.
Just to keep the water bottles away from George Pickens, I guess.
Yeah, that was certainly a surprising penalty to see, and I know that was one that Kirby Smart was not happy with.
Got Palmer Tom's on the line from Dawgs 247 Sports. Of course, Georgia, Alabama, the game of the year thus far, and it should be a huge one in Tuscaloosa, and certainly altered by the news of Nick Saban. One last thing on this would involve Saban and the aura and the dynasty, and now Kirby Smart trying to catch Saban in the SEC and being right there in regards to recruiting and talent and personnel on the field. Was that talked about at all, just in regards to trying to finally get that win against Alabama and show, hey, we're the best in the SEC now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Georgia's had 2 cracks at Nick Saban under Kirby Smart, and Kirby has had 2 cracks at his, former head coach. And I think Georgia has come away from both those games feeling like they easily could have won that. You look back at the 2017 national championship game in January of 2018. Obviously, it comes down to one play in overtime. That game was a game that Georgia was leading by double digits, easily could have won that. Fast forward 12 months later, they're playing in the same stadium, December 2018. Georgia once again ahead double digits, and they easily could have won that. I think you listen to Kirby Smart last year at SEC Media Days. He said the one thing that his team needed to do better was finish games, and I think he was directly addressing those 2 games. The 2 matchups with Alabama, and I think coming away from both those matchups, Georgia knows that they can compete with Alabama, and there aren't that many teams across the country that can line up toe-to-toe with Alabama and understand we are just as talented, if not more talented, than the team that's lining up across from us, and be able to fully go into that week and into that matchup knowing we've got a chance to win. And so I think for Georgia players, there's certainly a confidence. It's not a fear. It's not an intimidation. There's definitely respect for Alabama and what they've done, but they don't fear them. And I think that's going to be a big factor, especially when you're going into an environment like Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa.
We are 72 hours away from the kickoff in Tuscaloosa, and Georgia visits Alabama. It should be huge. It is, and it should be a close one, I would expect, as it has been the last 2 trips when these 2 got together to decide an SEC and a national championship. Again, Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.com. Please join him right there. Stephen, we heard the Georgia side. Would love to get your take on the big matchup coming up in Tuscaloosa. And, of course, I'm going to go to the Big Trouble spot. That looked like a flag football game in Oxford last Saturday night.
It was the most weirdest unconventional. Did not expect the performance there, in that game for Alabama against Ole Miss. Giving up 48 points in that matchup, giving up 647 yards in that matchup. I know for a fact that Coach Saban was not happy with it. The players were not happy with it, especially this coming against an unranked team like Ole Miss. Now, granted, Lane Kiffin, one of the better offensive minds in college football, but at the same time, Coach Saban demands perfection. He expects perfection from this team, and I remember just seeing the guys, walk off the field after the game. They were upset. They were disgruntled. They were highly bothered. So I look at this matchup, especially this week in practice. There's been a much better focus. There's been a much better attention to detail this week, a much better energy. So I'm excited to see, how this translates here on the field. Now, of course, the difference between Ole Miss and Georgia stylistically, Ole Miss kind of runs that hurry-up tempo style. Georgia's more of a true pro-style offense with running the football and play action. But it's gonna be a fun matchup.
I went back 2 years and looked at the Ole Miss game there in Oxford, and certainly personnel change. Lane Kiffin wasn't the Ole Miss head coach, and he's one of the best in the business in providing those matchup issues for the defense. But DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown at wide receiver. Of course, you remember the game well. They hit you up for a 75-yard touchdown on the game's opening play, and then, bam, that was it. The Bama defense clamped down after that. And this trending is, again, we don't want to overplay one game because the effort against Missouri, considering what they just put together against LSU, certainly wasn't bad at all because there was only 3 points on the board for Mizzou during meaningful minutes, and then the Texas A&M score was pretty much what we thought it would be, and they did a nice job against the Aggies. But is there any way to conceive what happened against Ole Miss, not just in the passing game, but there were runs right up the middle where it just looked like everybody vacated the center of the field, and Ole Miss was chewing up yardage both on the ground and through the air.
Some of it, Mark, was not having the right personnel on the field. At times, not having the guys that are responsible for doing those jobs. And I think that there are moments where Alabama players at times are asked to do a whole bunch of things instead of just simplifying that game plan and allowing those guys to just be able to make plays that were just a simplified game plan. So some of it was not having the right personnel in the field, most definitely, but also not getting that consistent push. I mean, you saw in the game where you have guys like LeBron Ray, DJ Dale, Christian Barmore, all guys of superstar potential, but are not getting that push they need to get. And on top of that, just missed tackles. There were moments where guys were getting to the backfield. They were knifing their way in the backfield. And I know the field was wet. I understand that. But when you have a guy by the ankle, by the jersey, when you have some leverage on an opposing player, you got to be able to finish the play. And there were a lot of times where Alabama would have Matt Corral, couldn't finish the tackle, or it would have Snoop Connor or have Jerrion Ely and just could not finish the tackle. So fundamental tackling, I counted 38 missed tackles in the matchup, and that is unlike an Alabama defense to have. So that right there has got to get fixed, but also having the right personnel on the field, playing the guys that are going to be able to execute those roles. Both of those two things have to be done.
The big news in the SEC came down earlier today that LSU and Florida canceled because of too many positive COVID tests coming out of the Florida facility. And then even bigger news came out a couple hours later when it was announced that Nick Saban had tested positive for COVID. We've discussed that on here and went live early to address those two situations. Is there anything else that you can provide in regards to Nick Saban's situation? I'm understanding that his test was confirmed. He took a second test. Do we know who's going to be on the sideline and in charge? My guess would be Steve Sarkisian.
That is the guy. Steve Sarkisian has been appointed as the point person by Coach Saban as he is running the operation of practice, running the operation at the program as we speak, while Coach Saban is running things remotely from home. Like you mentioned, Mark, Coach Saban had 2 different PCR tests, which are done by the medical staff here at the university. He got the news back at 1 p.m. today that it was a positive test. He immediately alerted the team, the players, and the coaching staff on Zoom, and then he went home to kind of isolate himself. The 2 things that he's been the most concerned about, number one, is not spreading anything to any members of his immediate family. Although he is asymptomatic, he's not showing any symptoms, does not want to spread anything to members of the immediate family. But then also, even more so than that, he just wants to make sure that the players are still focused, still high energy, still locked in, still lasered onto the job that they have to do. Now, of course, he lightly chuckled and said, just because I'm at home does not mean I fled the country. I'm still watching practices on Zoom. I'm still communicating with coaches, with players, with team managers. So I'm still seeing, what's going on. I'm just not out there presently right now due to this situation. So Saban is researching right now, trying to find a way to still possibly be out here for this matchup against Georgia. But if he cannot go, then he's already appointed Steve Sarkisian as the point person to run the operation for this game.
The ball's barely hitting the grass once it comes out of the hands of Mac Jones. He's just a tick under 80% completion percentage, coming off a tremendous game against Ole Miss at 28 of 32. He's got a tremendous yards per attempt, yards per completion percentage because of the stretching the field and, of course, the run after the catch ability of those tremendous wide receivers. Jalen Waddle having a great season, over 120 yards in each game thus far. And back to Jones, 8 touchdowns and 1 pick. Can you compare what we've seen out of this Alabama offense through 3 games with some of these great historic Alabama passing attacks under Tua here in 2018 and 19?
It's unreal, Mark. It is unreal. And what's crazy is I've been on your show countless times talking about for the last 2 to 3 years how dynamic Mac Jones can really truly be. And I remember just going back to the 2017 year when he came in as a freshman. He was working scout team for that offense, and he was throwing deep passes to Terrell Shavers then. Shavers, of course, now a wide receiver for Mississippi State. But at that time, Mac Jones was throwing deep passes to Terrell Shavers. And Nick Saban at one point stopped the practice, looked at Mac Jones and said, "Stop throwing him the ball deep all the time." Mac Jones lasers his head coach in the face and goes, "Well, if you want me to stop, tell your defense to check me then." And everybody at that practice was going, "Who has all of this mouth coming at Nick Saban?" And they found out it was Mac Jones, and people were like, "Whoa, it's this dude." And at that moment, I knew right then this dude is something to deal with. I mean, he came from a high school, the Bowles School in Jacksonville, Florida, under the late, great Corky Rogers, which Mac Jones, led those high school teams to multiple, Class 4A state championships. So the ability has always been there. 2 days before this season started, I spoke to 3 of Jones's quarterback coaches in Florida. They all said, this guy has got the potential to have a Joe Burrow type of season. Now, Burrow has already did the big thing, but Jones has some tendencies that Burrow had, last year, at LSU, and we're seeing this. Last season, when Tua got hurt, we saw Mac Jones win the game, and he had some early nerves, but against Arkansas, he played very well. Against Auburn, he went up against one of the best defensive fronts in college football, if not one of the best, and took some hits in that game. Yes, he had the 2 mistakes, but he still threw for 335 passing yards and 4 touchdowns against guys in that defensive front that got drafted. Derek Brown got drafted to the Panthers first round. Marlon Davidson got drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. They had guys from that front get drafted for Auburn. And then against Michigan in the Citrus Bowl, 16 for 25 passing, 327 yards and 3 touchdowns. against a defensive front that had the likes of Aiden Hutchinson, Josh Uche, among other guys make it to the NFL. So last year he grew in a lot of confidence, and so far this season, I mean, you got to give Steve Sarkisian a lot of credit for putting him in situations to be successful. But this team looks at Mac Jones the same way they look at Tua. The young man is locked in. He's playing incredible football. You know, I'm not shocked right now by how he's doing, because he is constantly perfecting himself and constantly studying film and getting himself better.
Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama joining us to break down the Tide with the enormous matchup coming Saturday night in Tuscaloosa against the Georgia Bulldogs that are playing lights out defense. And of course, the news coming out that Nick Saban has tested positive for COVID. Stephen, you give us as good a player profiles as anybody around. I would like to hear some background on, you know, with the two tremendous wide receivers that moved on to the NFL this past recruiting class, and then with Waddle and Smith, and everybody knows about their exploits. Waddle's just having an All-America type season, and Devonta Smith was a star a few years ago. John Metchie, am I pronouncing his last name correct? What can you tell us about him?
Now, some people call him Meechie. I call him Metchie. He prefers both, kind of a quiet, laid-back guy. But Metchie's an interesting story. He came in the 2019 class, a 4-star from Brampton, Canada, but played his high school ball in the Maryland area. And the guy's a flat stud. The guy's a stud, 6 feet, 195 pounds. When you watch him, I basically call him the Canadian twin of Calvin Ridley, because the body type is right there with Calvin. The hands are there. The route running is definitely getting there. This is a guy that works tremendously hard. He and Mac Jones spent a lot of time together in the offseason over the summer in Jacksonville, working on routes, working on timing, working on chemistry, those types of things. Jones and Metchie had 2 really good A-Day game performances prior to COVID coming in, 2018 and 2019. 2018, if you remember, Mark, I think it was Mac Jones was actually the MVP of the A-Day game in 2018, and then 2019, John Metchie was the MVP of the spring game. So these two know each other very well. They work off each other very well. He introduced himself to the college football world against A&M. 5 catches, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns. Played well against Ole Miss last week. 4 catches for 75 yards. And according to Devonta Smith, I got a chance to talk to him on Tuesday in the Zoom call, player interviews, and he just lit up talking about Metchie. This young man has worked so hard to get that 3rd wide receiver spot on the starting roster, and he got it in fall camp, worked his tail off, fending off a talent in Javon Baker, the freshman from Georgia, and also Slade Bolden as well. And the team really loves what Metchie can do. Nick Saban really likes the work ethic that this young man has. He's pushed himself to this opportunity. And, like I said, Mark, the hands there, the speed there, the body type there, the route running coming into frame. This is a program that continues to just pump out receivers, and John Metchie's the next one in line.
Folks, digest these numbers. 11 catches, 298 yards. I'll do the math for you. 27.1 yards per catch. We don't expect him to keep up that pace, but that's just phenomenal. Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.com breaking down the Tide as they face the Georgia Bulldogs coming up on Saturday night. Stephen, before you go, would love for you to let everyone know where they can find you and your call-in show in particular. That's an outstanding work by you and everybody there on the staff. It's a whole lot of fun. And of course, you talk hardcore college football.
Absolutely, Mark. The people can always find me on Twitter. That's at Coaching M. Smith on Twitter, at Coaching M. Smith on Twitter, or on Facebook. Of course, I am Stephen M. Smith on Facebook, Stephen M. Smith. The site is Touchdown Alabama Magazine. That's on Facebook, Touchdown Alabama Magazine. It's also on Twitter at TD Alabama Mag. The site itself, touchdownalabama.com. where we are breaking down the Crimson Tide from all sorts of angles. Of course, the big news came up today on Coach Saban, so we are literally flying stories out of the bakery right now as we speak with the site touchdownalabama.com.
Well, certainly, Stephen, with all that's going on surrounding Alabama football and the big news today, I would have certainly let you off the hook if you weren't able to join us. But I'm so glad that you found the time, so we appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mark. I enjoy doing this, man. This is fun.
All right, Steve. You have a great time at the ball game. It should be one for the ages.
Absolutely. You take care, Mark.